I always thought that bad luck was temporary, that sooner or later, something good had to happen to me. But that time, my luck took me straight to hell. It all started with a simple ad stuck to a pole near the Aramajak market in Zapopan. They were looking for staff for various areas, high salary, immediate work, no experience required. Without hesitation, I tore the ad off the pole with trembling hands. I had been unemployed for months, living off favors. The little money I earned carrying packages at the market barely kept me afloat. I had arrived from Mexico City with the promise of an office job, but the person who was supposed to help me was fired, leaving me practically on the streets. Life in the city was hard for someone like me. No education, no connections. So I called the number, clinging to the hope of getting something. Anything. My situation was desperate, and I was willing to do whatever it took. A man answered with a kind yet formal voice. He told me the interview would take place at a downtown cafe the next day. When I arrived, I found him. A well-dressed man in expensive clothes, flashing a confident smile. Behind him, several people in the same desperate situation as mine were being interviewed by different men. After moving to a sort of makeshift office, the man looked at me and said, "Look, Julian, the job is simple. Just answering phones and following instructions, nothing difficult for someone like you. But the office is in another city. If you're interested, we can arrange everything today," he explained while stirring his coffee or tea. Something in his tone made me uneasy, but hunger overcomes any bad feeling. "Okay, sounds good. What about the salary?" I asked, trying to sound calm and not desperate. "You'll earn 5,000 pesos a week, and if you do well, you can make up to 10,000, enough to never worry about money again," he smiled, revealing perfect white teeth. I was shocked. That kind of money for simply answering phones? Common sense told me I should have gotten up and left, but I nodded. It was too much money to turn down. I couldn't stop thinking about everything I could fix with that salary. So I accepted without thinking or asking any more questions. What did I have to lose? I was broke and needed something. Anything. "Perfect, Julian. Tomorrow, we'll meet at the bus station. Bring only a few things. We'll be waiting to transfer you to the workplace," he said, handing me a card with a schedule and instructions. A strange feeling settled in my chest. Something wasn't right. But what other choice did I have? At 8 a.m., I was there with a light backpack and more questions than answers. The first thing I noticed was that I wasn't alone. A group of people waited, mostly young, like me. Some women carried backpacks and suitcases. Others hugged their partners with nervous expressions. A tall man in a denim jacket and cap watched us from afar. After a while, he approached. "Are you the ones being transferred?" he asked. We all nodded. Without another word, he signaled us to follow. He led us to the back of the station, where several white vans with tinted windows were parked. Someone handed out bottles of water. Other men, with hard faces and cold eyes, ordered us inside the vans, no questions asked. "And the trip?" one of the young men asked nervously. "It's long," replied the man in the cap. "Better save your water. You'll need it. We're not making any stops." Without further explanation, he closed the van door. I sat by the window. As we drove, the familiar streets faded behind us. Soon we left the city, taking secondary roads. After 2 hours, the scenery changed. No longer populated areas, just open fields and dirt roads. Inside the van, murmurs grew tense. "Hey, this doesn't look like a city," said a woman in the front. "This isn't what they promised us," another woman said, distressed. "They said we'd work in an office building, but this looks like the middle of nowhere." No one had an answer. We kept driving. The sun set and night fell like a thick shadow over us. Finally, the van stopped. A man opened the door and ordered us out. The air smelled of countryside and burning wood. Under different circumstances, it might have been calming. But then they appeared. A group of men with long guns stood in a line, waiting. One of them, with dirty boots and a scar on his face, stepped forward, looking us up and down. He smiled. Then he said something that plunged me into pure terror. In that brief moment, when your life flashes before your eyes, when you regret everything but can do nothing, I understood. "Welcome," he said. "There's no job here. You either serve or you die." The world collapsed around me. At that precise moment, I knew bad luck had never been temporary. We had been tricked, dragged into a training and extermination camp, and we never even saw it coming. They made us line up with our hands behind our heads. There were at least 30 of us, men and women, wearing the same expression of absolute panic. No one spoke. No one dared move. The man with the scar paced like an executioner. "I'll tell you how things work here, trash," he said coldly. "There are no salaries, no days off, no complaints. You belong to the organization now. The men will be trained, some as soldiers, others as lookouts." He paused. His gaze shifted toward the women. "And the women," he continued with a smirk, "will be useful in many ways. They'll help with cleaning, and if they're useful enough, they'll be trained to handle weapons, to accompany the bosses. But on the other hand, they were worth less than men, so they knew it." My stomach turned hearing that bastard, and I wanted to speak, to demand answers. But a strong hand grabbed my neck and pushed me to the ground. "Rules are obeyed, miserable," growled a man of enormous build as he subdued me with his calloused grip. My face hit the dry earth. I wasn't the only one. In a matter of seconds, screams filled the night. They stripped us of our backpacks, cell phones, and wallets. They separated us into groups. The most robust were taken aside, while the skinny ones like me were thrown into a corner of the camp along with the women. In a makeshift gallery, we spent the night, not sleeping, but listening. The wind carried the cries of those who had worse luck, along with music, war songs, and occasional gunshots that kept us on edge. Those men were insane. I remember they took some of the women away that night. I never saw them return, though I could still hear their screams and sobs in the distance. That was our welcome to hell. The camp was a large, fenced-off area with wooden shacks and miserable sheet metal huts. We slept on the ground, without blankets, without anything. There was no possibility of escape. Armed guards were everywhere, and we were so far from civilization that getting lost out there meant certain death. And if we ever doubted that, the sight of a man hanging from a tree with his entrails exposed was a clear reminder of what happened to those who tried. Hunger came quickly. They gave us only a few hard tortillas and a glass of water each day. Some hesitated, while others devoured their meager rations in seconds, left to endure the rest of the day with their stomachs growling. And then, the tests began. Those deemed fit were forced into brutal training. Shooting, running through the woods, fighting amongst ourselves. Anyone who complained was beaten until they collapsed, left battered and bleeding. And those who were deemed useless, well, they simply stopped being there the next day. The women suffered too. Some were forced to clean the chief's cabins, while others were taken to accompany them at night. We didn't know what happened to them, but we knew enough. Some returned, beaten and ashamed. Others never came back at all. Then came the hunts. It was a game for those bastards. At night, they would release the weakest among us into the woods, giving them a few minutes head start before setting out after them. The first one caught died instantly. The rest were dragged back, bloody, with terror frozen in their eyes, serving as training for the new recruits. We had to finish them off, with knives, with machetes, beating them until they bled out. The foreman always reminded us that one day we'd be in their place. They said it with smiles, crooked, cruel, inhuman. I remember a boy, no older than 17, who begged for his life. They handed him a machete and ordered him to kill another prisoner. He refused. A gunshot to the head ended his hesitation. That was our fate, if we didn't learn our lesson. As the days passed, people vanished. At first, we thought they had escaped. Then we understood the truth. Those who disappeared were simply discarded. No one asked questions. No one spoke their names. We only prayed not to be next. Fear turned us into shadows. We moved with our eyes lowered, silent, never provoking the guards. But even that was no guarantee. If someone got sick, they disappeared. If someone starved, they disappeared. If someone cried at night, they disappeared. Some whispered that the bodies were thrown into pits. Others said they were used in rituals for Santa Muerte and the devil. I didn't want to know the answer. Fear had consumed me. I was ceasing to be human. Weeks passed. I lost count of the days. Then, one night, they handed me a rifle. "Today, you're going to prove if you're good for something, Julian," a man with a gold tooth told me. They took me and several others to a clearing in the woods. 2 prisoners knelt before us, hands tied. One stared defiantly. The other had already surrendered, his gaze empty. They were members of an enemy cartel, captured, imprisoned, meant to serve as an example. The man with the scar pointed a gun at me. "Finish him off," he said. "If you don't, you'll be the one going into that pit." My heart pounded. The barrel of his gun was aimed at my head. My hands trembled as I gripped the rifle. I knew there was no other way out. If I pulled the trigger, I'd kill an innocent man. If I didn't, they'd kill me. And in that moment, I understood something. Life was worthless here. It was either you or the other guy. I clenched my jaw, closed my eyes, and felt the cold weight of the rifle in my hands. Then I pulled the trigger. The roar of the gunfire plunged me into madness. In front of me lay the lifeless body of a human being, someone I had killed. I had no choice. Or at least, that's what I told myself. My faith was the only thing I had left. And then, for the first time, I prayed to Santa Muerte. She had been in my thoughts since the moment I arrived. She became my bastion in the midst of despair. My uncles, my father, they had instilled that faith in me, and now it was all I had. There was no other explanation for how I had lasted so long. Others from my original group were all dead, except for me. That night was a bloodbath. I watched, empty, emotionless, as those bastards laughed while we hacked enemies to pieces. They forced us to eat their flesh. I don't want to talk about it. Just remembering it makes me sick, makes me feel guilty. And then, the worst happened. The first time I saw them, I didn't understand what they were. That day, they loaded 10 of us into a van, hands tied, fear dry in our throats. Outside, the sun burned relentlessly. A criminal lit a cigarette and smirked at us. "Today, you're going to see the true heart of this place, idiots," he sneered. "Better pay attention, or you won't live to tell about it. You're about to graduate." The road was long, filled with potholes and dust. Next to me, a boy, Omar, barely 18, trembled. He was missing 2 teeth, courtesy of the beatings he'd taken for fainting during training. "I don't want to die here, cousin," he whispered. "But we're close, right? We can escape before it's too late." "Don't you think?" I had no words to comfort him. When the van stopped, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Thick, oily, nauseating, a putrid stench of burning flesh. I had smelled it before back when I worked in a chicken and meat shop. They pushed us out. In front of us, a clearing in the woods, and in the center, massive, gaping pits, black as the devil's mouth. Inside, bodies stacked on top of each other. Decomposing, flies, smoke, gasoline, and standing among it all, a blackened statue of Santa Muerte coated in soot and ash. This wasn't just a place of execution, it was an altar. They called it Las Cremas de la Santa, the crematoriums of the Holy One. This was where the useless ended up. A man with a skull tattooed on his neck grinned at us. "Today it's your turn to work here." They handed us gloves. Our job was to drag the bodies from the trucks to the pits. Some corpses were stiff, others still warm. Some had been our fellow prisoners, others were enemies. Some were just unlucky people who had stumbled into the wrong place. Each corpse I touched made my stomach churn. And then, as flames roared into the sky, I knelt before Santa Muerte's statue. With trembling hands, I offered her my blood, and I begged for a miracle. At that moment, a freezing wind blew through the clearing, a wind that had no reason to exist in that hell. The men grew restless, and some even crossed themselves. And then I saw her move. I know I wasn't hallucinating. I can swear that smoke-blackened statue tilted its skull slightly. It wasn't a trick of the light, and it wasn't my mind breaking. She had heard me. And that night, death would come for me, but not to take me, to free me. After returning from that hell, the atmosphere became stranger. It was as if the field itself, the same place where I had been trapped, was suspended in time. The wind suddenly rose, icy and biting, as if a shadow had fallen over us. It wasn't a natural wind, nor one of those that blow on warm mountain nights. It wasn't a sinister wind. I was lying on the ground, covered with a piece of dirty canvas, unable to close my eyes. Fear kept me awake, and every creak, every step of the guards, every murmur of the other prisoners put me on alert. But what truly terrified me was the feeling of a presence. Something was moving in the darkness. At first, it was just a blurry figure manifesting among the nearby trees. I didn't know if it was a dream or if reality was crumbling around me, but something deep inside me told me that I wasn't alone. The camp was completely silent, as if everyone had stopped breathing. Even the normally outrageous criminals with their war music and gunshots had fallen into an eerie hush. I couldn't tear my eyes away from that figure in the shadows. So tall, so powerful, and holding a scythe. It was her. I stood up slowly, my body aching from days of torture. My muscles resisted, but my mind was completely alert. The wind rattled my bones, and I couldn't ignore the strange hissing, like a barely audible voice coming from every direction. Julie. They were calling my name. I recognized it immediately. I looked around for others who might have heard it, but they were all motionless, staring into space or asleep, as if the figure itself sliding through the darkness had frozen time in the camp. Somehow, I stood up completely. My legs were shaking, but I kept moving toward the sound, guided by an inexplicable force, feeding a need I couldn't control. As I got closer to the edge of the field, the shadows seemed to move faster. Something was calling me. Something was coming from the trees, from the place where the wind had begun to howl, and there, in the center of the clearing, surrounded by a thick fog, I saw her, Santa Muerte. She was not a statue, nor an image. She was real, a corporeal figure wrapped in a black cloak, dark as the night itself. Her skull-like face watched me from the shadows with a gaze so penetrating, I felt my soul was trapped in it. Her scythe gleamed under the dim lamplight, reflecting a cold glow that seemed to have a life of its own. Everything around her was silent, no wind, no rustling branches, nothing, only the sound of my own trembling breath. Then I heard a murmur in my head, a deep echo, a vibration in my mind. I heard you, Julian. I have heard you in your suffering and in your despair. I have decided to help you, to take you with me. I wanted to speak, to shout, to beg, but the words got stuck in my throat. Terror paralyzed me. Emotion had me on the verge of collapse. I thought I was insane. But it was true. Santa Muerte didn't move, but her presence filled the entire space, drowning out any attempt at rebellion. The darkness seemed to follow her everywhere, an omnipresent force that had somehow heard my pleas and my sacrifices. Her voice grew clearer, closer, as if she was standing right beside me, though I could neither see her nor move. I have heard you offer me your blood, your soul, and your life. Now follow me and I will lead you to the light, she said. I didn't know if it was a dream or a hallucination, but my mind was breaking. Then her scythe gleamed with such force that the trees trembled violently around her. The wind rose into a whirlwind, throwing me to my knees. I thought I had lost my mind. I thought all the horrors I had suffered had led me to this moment, to this point in time where I was already seeing things I couldn't explain. And then I realized this was no dream. The ground began to shake. The branches of the trees bent, as if nature itself was bending to her will. The air thickened with an indescribable tension, as if something was about to explode. Escape. There is the way. Your faith has saved you, for you are righteous, she whispered. And then, as if the very air was pushing me forward, my body reacted. I ran. I ran without looking back, my legs nearly giving way, but fear driving me forward. The figure of Santa Muerte vanished into the fog that had formed around her. But behind me, the cold wind followed my trail. With every step, I felt something approaching, chasing me. I ran faster. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I had to escape. At the edge of the field, the guards began to wake from their drunken stupor. Their silhouettes moved through the shadows, and fear gripped me once more. But it was no longer the fear I had known before. Now, I understood. My fate was decided by something beyond their understanding. So I ran. I ran for my life, along the path that the saint had mysteriously left unguarded.